Okay, we finished off the last video having created our player, and if we've done everything correctly, we should have the option of playing a game and seeing our lovely character fall off the screen. So we're now going to continue on with creating a tile, basically something for our player to stand on. So we are going to create a new scene. So again, go to scene and new scene. So scene, new scene. And it's going to again be a custom node. And this time it's a static body 2D. Now this is a little bit different than the kinematic. A static body is something that's not going to move around, but it's still going to be something that can be collided with. So kinematic body, like the little icon suggests, I guess, is something that moves, and a static, as the name suggests, stays still. So we're going to search for static, and we want the static body 2D. Now you might have noticed, if I quickly just go to add scene, that we've got recents coming up. And this is something that we can use quite often as we're building. If we've been using a particular node regularly, we can see it in recent, and we can also put things in our favorites if it's one that we use a lot. And things like sprites and static bodies and kinematic bodies are things that you'll probably use a lot, so you might find yourself putting them in your favorites. But for now, we're going to have a static body, and we're going to rename it to be called tile. So tile with a capital T. And even at this point, even though the instructions don't say, yeah, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to make sure I'm saving it in my scenes folder. And again, tile is a perfectly fine name for it. Now, things I need to do, I need to add a collision shape 2D. So remember, choose the tile, add a scene, and I'm just going to take it straight from my recents there. So it's a child of the tile. We need to set the shape to be a rectangle. So in our collision shape, we will say rectangle. So new rectangle, here it is, new rectangle shape, that's fine. We'll set the extent, so basically it's its size, to 32 and 32. So with that collision shape set, we are going to change its extent. So that is in transform. No, it's not. I've forgotten where it is. Visibility, no. I've actually forgotten where that is. Huh, interesting. Well, let's just do it with the box. So we can go that way and that way. I still don't know where the actual value is, but we'll find it later on. Oh, yes, I do. I apologize. We need to double click on rectangle, and that's the extents there. So if we click on that, single click, sorry, it expands that out and gives the extent. So it wants it to be 32 by 32. So let's set those straight away, 32 and 32. There we go. Now we need to drag the tile image from the file system. So if we come down to our resources here on the left, we go into our assets, we go into sprites, and you'll see there is a tile. Now, if we just drag this in, it's going to do something for us, which is adding a sprite. So you can see that little bit of text that's come up here is we're adding a sprite. So if we drop that in, that's had the effect of adding a sprite with the name of the value we're bringing in. And you notice though that it's made it a child of collision shape because that's what I had selected. That's okay. I'm just going to drag it so that it is a child of the overall tile. Okay. It's already called tile because that's what we dragged in. That's okay. But we're going to set its position. So clicking on it, we're going to go to transform and set its position to be 0, 0, so that it is centered along with the collision shape. Okay, and let's save that scene again. There we go, saved. Now we're going to go back to our main scene. So again, if you don't have it open in one of your tabs at the top, go to your scenes and double click on scene so it opens up. In our main scene, we're going to bring some tiles in. So finding our tile scene down here, we're simply going to drag it in and we now have a tile. If we drag in another one, we can put it next to it and we can have two tiles. Okay, we can click on it and do Control D, I believe, Command D on Mac, and we can duplicate those tiles and then we can just move them around. And notice it's adding new nodes, or sorry, scenes into our node tree on the left hand side. And we can set up a level basically of platforms or tiles that this player is going to stand on. Now we can also turn on the snap to grid. So at the moment you can see I can position these exactly, and if I zoom in it's very easy to get them a little bit out of alignment. So if I turn on the snap to grid, so smart snap, it's going to try and lock them together a bit better. Okay, so you can see that one wasn't very locked at all. So if I now do that, it's trying to lock them in a better locking. I can also turn the grid on if I wanted to see that a bit more. So I'm locking it to these grid lines that are there. So I'm just going to chuck a couple of tiles. I'm not going to make a full level at the moment. That's something you can do in a moment. But I'm just going to do enough so that if I save this scene now, so this is saving the main scene, and I press play, you can now see my player has stopped on that tile level that we've made. And if I use my keys, I can now move side to side, and I can press up arrow to jump. Of course, if I now walk off the edge, I'm going to fall out of space. So very quickly, let's make a proper level, and I'm going to zoom out a bit. Now, you might not have been aware, but this blue box, you can just see it if I go around. In fact, if I turn the grid off, you can see this box here. This is what we can see, right? So while we have an infinite space all around us, this is the part that will fit on our screen. So that's what I'm going to be building my level to fit in at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to quickly make a level a little bit like the one over here in the description, and then I'm going to come back. So I'll probably do this in a little bit of fast forward, I guess. Okay, I've got something a little bit like this tutorial over here, some platforms for my character to jump on. Now, you might have noticed a huge amount of tiles happening over here. I'm going to show you again one more thing that's not part of this tutorial, and again it's about tidying up. So I'm going to come up to main scene, and I'm going to add another node, and it's just going to be a basic node, right? Node 2D. In fact, it doesn't have to be a node 2D. It can just be a plain node. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that node all the way up so it is a child of main scene, not of player. And then I'm going to chuck all these tiles as children of that. So I've just shift clicked on all of those, and I'm going to bring them as children of node. Okay, that didn't quite work. Try that again. Drag them onto node. There we go. Now they're children of node. I'm going to rename the node to be tiles. And the reason I'm doing that is because now I can shrink that down, and all my tiles are inside that node. It's not going to affect the function of the game at the moment, but it just allows me to clean up this side a little bit so I can see what I'm doing now without all those tiles in the way. Now, there is a better way to do this ground or this tile work, and it's something that you can investigate at a later stage about something called a tile set. And you can even automate this in a lot of ways, but that's something for a future video. So let's have a look now. If we play our game, obviously after saving it first, if we play it, we've got a platform game at the moment that technically works. We can jump, we can move around, we can do whatever we want. We can still jump off the screen, and of course if we do that we can't come back, so that is a small problem. But technically, and I'll just press replay or restart, sorry, technically we do have the absolute basics of a platforming game. So let's stop that and let's have a look at adding in an enemy. So we're going to create a new scene again. So scene, new scene. It's going to be again an area 2D. So this is a new node that we haven't used. So let's go to other nodes. Let's go area 2D. There it is. And so again, this is one that is going to be able to collide with things, but it's going to have some other functionalities. It's going to come into play a bit more. So the reason why you would choose an area 2D over a static 2D over a kinematic body, and so these are things that you're just going to get used to as you do more and more. So it's not kinematic because we're not going to control it. It is going to move, so we can't use a static body, so we're using an area 2D at the moment because we want this to be able to collide with other things. So we've created the new area 2D, and we're going to attach a collision shape, and we're also going to attach a sprite. And if we zoomed in, I'm not going to do that here, we can see that on the little image there. And by this stage, we're starting to get the hang of things. We need a sprite and a collision shape in both cases. So let's add in a child, and this can be a collision shape. I've already got that chosen, and also a child of it will be a sprite. Okay, let's put our sprite in first. So click on the sprite, we'll go to assets and sprites, and we will get the enemy and we'll put that over texture. Now I still prefer to do this instead of just drag it into the game area because it makes sure I know what I'm doing. It makes sure I name it properly and so forth. Otherwise it's sort of a bit of a guessing game. So I'll zoom in a little bit so I can see it. And my collision shape I'm going to set as a new circle shape because this is a circular object. So we want to be able to see that. Now again, we're going to just move that down underneath Sprite, not as a child of Sprite, but underneath it so that it's something we can see. And we're going to set that to be about the size of our enemy sprite so that it's going to collide at the right time. All right. We're going to put a script on this. So we're going to click the area 2D. Actually, we forgot to rename this. Sorry, let's call this enemy. And at this point, let's save it as well. So saving it in our scenes folder, enemy is correct. That's fine. Let's add in the script. So clicking on our enemy or the main top node, in this case, we'll add a script. Again, everything here can be left the same. We're just going to change that path because remember, I've created a scripts path. So I want to save all my scripts in there. So you can see this is extending area 2D, not kinematic body or anything else because it wants all the functionality of an area 2D. We'll start by taking this set of code, which again, like before, is setting up some variables. So we'll do those at the top. So we are going to have a variable for speed, which is another integer, movement distance, another integer, a starting x and a starting y, which are floats. Now floats are decimal values, so they can have a decimal value to them. Integers obviously can't. So floating point values, that's what we call the decimal place, a floating point. You'll also notice that we have this new word at the start called export. And the good thing about using an export variable is you'll be able to see in a second, we can change the values in our inspector. So once this has been saved, and I'll do that right now actually, if I just click on the enemy, you can see over here, those two values, speed and move distance, are values that we can change here while developing. That's because we exported them, they become available. The X and Y are not available until the scene is ready because we've used the on ready, so it doesn't try and make these until this whole scene is ready, and that is because it's picking up the default value as the position of this node in, or sorry, this scene in our game. And if we don't have this fully made, we don't have a position, and that would cause an error. So if you're going to refer to existing values, it might be good to use the onReady variable command. And that's again talked about just in here. We're now also going to add a physics process to this one. So let's copy that bit of code, and we'll copy that physics process down here. And we're lucky with tabs, we didn't need to in this case. Yes, we might need to. Oh no, it's giving us an error because it's referring to this move to command function that we don't have yet. So it hasn't been declared, and that's because we're declaring this a bit further down. So let's copy that now and paste it in. We'll go a little bit below this, back to the start, and paste it there. So that should fix that error. Yes, it does. All right, let's have a little look at this first. We won't necessarily go through it 100%, but we'll have a little look. So a bit like before, the position x, so position is a built-in value, is equal to this move to command that we've made, which we'll talk about, where we're saying take the x position, look at the target x and where it's supposed to end up, the speed, multiplied by this del value, which, delta, which is not on our screen, delta value. We talked about delta a little bit before. And then it says if the position of x is equal to the target position, so target x, come down here and check. And if the position x needs to be moved or not, otherwise it goes back to the start. Now the move to command is one we've built, although we've copied it. And again, it's saying take the current position, the to position, and the step, so how much it moves in between. They're the values that we're passing here. The current x position, the target x position, and the speed multiplied by delta to help with computer differences. So we're starting with a new variable, which is taking the current value that we gave in. We're trying to work out if we're moving in a positive or negative direction by looking at if the new value is less than or greater than where we're trying to move to. And depending on that, we are either setting it in the direction of 2 or not. And we're either adding or taking away the step value. So we're either moving in a positive direction, which is moving to the right, or moving in a negative direction, which is moving to the left. And of course, if those two are the same, current and 2 are the same, we're not adding any step. And then we're returning that value, which we use up here. Okay, now that might take a while for you to get used to, and you can play with the script and see, what if I change the value? What if I do something different? But in short, that should create an option where we can move to and from a position. So let's save that scene. Let's go back to our main scene. And again, if you're not in your main scene, just click back on it. And like it's showing here, we're going to put this enemy in this space. Okay, so we're going to take our enemy. I'm just going to shrink these back down a bit. Our enemy scene we just made, and I'm going to stick it in this space. Okay, so now if we press play, we'll see that our enemy will roll across, but it's only going so far because the distance that we set, so if we go back, we look at our enemy scene, the distance, move distance is only 100. We want to work out what the distance is to go from here all the way across to this one. Okay, so what is the value to go from here to there? Now, one way we can look at that is if we look at our position, we can see that being shown on our environment, okay? And then we can look at what the position is over here. Now, one way to do that would be to look at the, the transform. So its x position currently where it's sitting is 316. And if we go across and put it where we want it to be, its x position is 785. So the difference between those is what, 450 give or take? I know in the example it says 500, but obviously I've set my blocks up slightly differently. So I'm going to put it back here, and then I'm going to go up to this move distance and change that to be approximately 450. And if I run that now, I should see that enemy get roughly to that point, a little bit off, Okay, so maybe go a little bit more, maybe make it 460, and we'll try that again. There we go, it got to the end. Now, it's also quite slow, so let's speed that up a little bit. So we'll come back and we'll change its speed to maybe 250. Okay, so it's moving much more quickly now, and it's got to the end and it has stopped. Okay. Now, there's a problem with that. Okay, it should be coming back, and we're going to try and work out why that is in just a second. Okay, to be honest, I've just popped on to pause for a moment the recording to have a look at what was going on with this enemy, because it should be bouncing between these two. Now, what I found is that the code is a little bit dodgy, and it doesn't work unless you start on exactly a round number. Now, what I mean by that, if we close the running game and we come back to our enemy and we have a look down here at its position, when I dragged it in, of course, it just gets some random position on the x-axis and the y-axis. But you can't have an x with a decimal value. Now, the decimal is important for its movement, so we do need a float value, but you need to make this an exact number for starting. Okay, the y position doesn't matter vertically so much, but the x position does. And it just means that if you don't start with an exact number here, you're not going to get exact values. Now, there are ways we can fix this. Let's just see it working first. So with an exact value for x, you'll see that it now hits those left and right values and it moves. Now, I would probably program this a bit differently, but for the sake of this tutorial, I won't go changing that code right now. So the solution to this is, if you're placing one of these enemies, is that you make sure it starts with an exact X value, otherwise it can't get to the end. Now, looking back to the tutorial, what it's saying is we're going to clone the enemy, because of course if I walk down to this enemy, my enemy just goes through me, or I go through it, depending on your point of view. I certainly don't get damaged or killed in any way by that enemy. That's certainly not what we want for our game. So that's what we're going to quickly do in this case now. So we are going to stop playing the game. If you saw those numbers running, I just chucked a little bit of code in for a moment just to see the X and Y values of the enemy, just to try and work out what was happening. I'll remove that in just a second. We're now going to move on to something to do with what we call signals. And signals is a way for it to pass values and things that are happening from one node to another. So in the case of this, the enemy scene, we're going to make sure that's what we've got chosen. So we go to the enemy scene, not the one in here, the actual enemy scene. So this is the enemy scene in the game, but we want to change the way the whole enemy, every enemy we ever have, works. So we want the enemy scene, okay? With that scene chosen, we're going to come over here, and instead of the inspector, we're going to choose node. And we can see signals that this enemy or this node here can respond or trigger. So these are things that happens to it that it can trigger and do something. And as it says here, we want the one body entered. So if a physics body, which our player is a physics body, remember, enters into this shape that we've created, this signal gets triggered and it can then respond to that. So we want that body entered signal, and we're going to simply double click on it. Now it's saying, hey, what do you want this signal to be joined to? Well, we can join it to our enemy, that's fine. Actually, no. Yes, it is, sorry. We're going to join it to our enemy, and we'll leave it as this on enemy body entered. This is what's going to get run. This is the function that is going to get run. Now, we can put anything we like here, but we usually just go with the default name, which is based on the signal that we're using, the node that we're using, etc. And we're just going to say connect. So it's made this new function, and this little indicator here says that there's a signal related to this. So this signal is when the body is enters it, this will happen. And so far we've got a pass there, nothing actually happens. Now what we're going to do is copy this code instead. So we're going to copy from there, and we're going to paste it in here instead. Actually, sorry, I didn't even notice. We've already got the function name there. So let's just take this part of the code and paste it in here instead. It should look like this now, sorry. So what this is saying is when we enter into this function, because the body has entered, the first thing we're doing is saying is the body, so that's what's being passed in, the name of it is a player. Now remember, that is what we've called our player node. So it's basically saying, is it called player? Well, yes, it is. And if it is, then we're saying take the body, the thing that's entered in, and it's going to die. And die is just a built-in term for kill a node. Basically, get rid of that node. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our player. Let's save this for a second, sorry. Now we're going to go back to our player node, okay, our player scene, sorry, and we're going to add a function for die. So let's copy this function from here, and we'll put it at the bottom of everything else so far. All right, and this is basically a function called die. So when it is told to die, we want something to happen. In this case, we're going to say to reload the scene. So basically, we're going to get the tree, which is all the stuff over here, and we're going to reload the current scene. So remember, this is all happening in main scene. So the player here says, hey, load the whole new scene again and start it from scratch. So let's save that one, and let's now try that out. So we now should be able to hit our enemy, and it should basically restart our game. Okay, so it says, hey, the enemy has been hit by a body. That body has the name of player, so we've told our player to die, but we have given a function called die that actually reloads the game. So that is how this is working. So we're going to leave it there. In the next video, we'll look at how to add and collect some coins.